Throw it my way. Last year's pass catcher set a new standard. Can we expect an encore this year? Mel Kiper Jr. and I are diving into the best wide receivers of the 2025 NFL draft class. That's coming up. Plus, we're responding to your questions, your takes, and your draft dreams as First Draft starts right now. Hello and welcome in to another edition of First Draft. We have so much going on as we are exactly 2 months away from the 2025 NFL Draft. A reminder, we are live twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. You can always find us on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel, on Mondays on TV as well. We have a huge week coming up, which includes a new mock draft from none other than the man who invented them, Mel Kiper Jr. Mel, it's Combine Week. How are you?
Excited for a lot of reasons, Field. First of all, we got the mock draft 2.0 coming out this week. New positional rankings coming out. New top 25 big board, the combine workout. We're going to finally get accurate measurables on a lot of these players. Arm length going to be critical. I always talk about it. People say I talk about it too much. Well, guess what? It's important in terms of projecting college to pro and how these guys will be. So, yeah, it's going to be a really important week in this process, and I can't wait to get it started, Field.
Can't wait as well, Mel. It's one of my favorite weeks of the year. A reminder, by the way, if you want to see any episode of First Draft, take your phone out and scan that QR code that you see on the bottom right corner of the screen right now. But Mel, no time to waste. We're going to dive into wide receivers throughout the next portion of this show. And let's begin. And this is your top 10 wide receivers prior to those updated positional ranks and prior to the mock draft. So we're going to get into this, and let's start with a question that comes from David Gilbert on Twitter. Could you enlighten us on the top 3 wide receivers in this draft and what they bring to the table? In David's estimation, it's Tetairoa, McMillan, Luther Burden, and also Travis Hunter, plus the best fit scheme-wise. What would that be for them? All right, so Mel, let's dive right in, and let's get into Travis Hunter, who you can evaluate him as a corner, you can evaluate him as a wide receiver. I'm evaluating him as both. Is he the top wide receiver on your board? And if so, why?
No question about it, Field. He's the number 1 wide receiver. He is the number 1 corner. And I think the great thing about Travis is he hasn't yet had an opportunity to define that because he's playing both ways in college and he's out there for so many plays. In the NFL, he's going to have to be obviously trying to figure it out as well. But can you imagine if he could have just settled in? If he was just a wide receiver, what would he be? If he was just a corner, what would he be? Being so great at both spots kind of hurts him a little bit, Field, because it doesn't, number one, let him define where he's going to be great in the NFL. It doesn't allow him to be great at that spot. Number one, because he hasn't played it the whole game, just one spot. He's got to worry about a whole other side of the ball, right? And the stamina and the endurance it takes to do that. So you're not going to be out there, fresh every play when you're playing so many plays and on both sides of the ball with the demands of tackling and covering down the field and preventing touchdowns and then scoring touchdowns and be able to do things after the catch. This is overload, Field. This is overload for a player. And guess what? He dealt with it like a champion. So anybody that wants to say Travis Hunter is the best player in this draft, now I understand Abdul Carter is a heck of a pass rusher, but Travis Hunter, if you're the Giants and you don't get, say, Matthew Stafford, or you get Stafford, you look at Hunter. If you're the New England Patriots, everybody's saying Will Campbell. Hey, Travis Hunter would look awful good in the Patriots uniform. He'd look awful good in the Giants uniform. He'd look awful good in any uniform. So Travis Hunter, to me, is clearly, without any hesitation, by a mile, the best wide receiver in this draft.
Mel, I'm right there with you. I think he is the most natural playmaker that I have seen in a long time coming out in the NFL draft because the ball skills are simply incredible. It feels like the football is thrown on a string to him. Now, some of that, of course, is due to the credit that Shedeur Sanders deserves for being a very accurate passer. But Travis Hunter, despite his modest frame, Mel, he's a guy that might be 185 pounds going into the combine this week. I'm not sure whether Travis Hunter will even step on a scale this week, but if he does, it wouldn't surprise me if he's 190 pounds at maximum. And yet the play strength that he shows in contested catch situations, making catches outside of his frame, tracking the football down the field, working his way back to line of scrimmage to make catches as well. It just feels like the ball is always going to find its way to Travis Hunter, and he is remarkable after the catch, Mel. It just feels like every time he has the football in the open field, he's thinking 6 points. So I think he is the clear-cut top wide receiver, Mel. I actually have landed on this. I know that Travis Hunter has the ability to play both ways, but one of the most popular questions that you and I have been asked is, if he's just going to play one or the other, which is he better at? I think he's a better wide receiver than he is a cornerback, Mel, which is not to say that he's a bad cornerback prospect by any stretch. It's just how confident I feel in Travis Hunter as a wide receiver that I believe he has not just Pro Bowl upside, but all-pro upside as a wide receiver if he were to commit to exclusively that side of the ball. He also is the number one player in my prospect rankings. He also was the number one pick in my last mock draft. But let's get to wide receiver 2 in this year's draft now, at least based off of how it has stood for much of this year. That's Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona, who is 6'5", 209 pounds. Again, those measurements unverified until later on this week, we think, in Indianapolis. Mel, he's the only player with at least 1,300 receiving yards in each of the past 2 FBS seasons. How is he able to be so productive?
The contested catches. I mean, look at him here with the length and the ability he has to outdo a cornerback in college for the football. It was spectacular. And the consistency from year to year. He had 84 catches this past year, 90 the previous year. Average per catch is right around 16 both years. 10 touchdowns 2 years ago, 8 this year. I mean, you're talking about a guy who put up the numbers. Now, we talk about contested. That's against college corners. Most of those guys aren't going to be in the NFL. In the NFL, will he be as effective in those types of situations against the best in the world? That's still to be determined. That's why for right now, there's a range for Tetairoa McMillan for T-Mac. Does he go at round 12 to Dallas? Top 10's a little rich right now when you talk to people in the league. 12 to Dallas, and if they take a running back receiver, he would have to be in the mix if they go wide out. Does he get down to 22 to the Chargers in that area? So somewhere 12 to 22 right now is the range, not necessarily top 10 when you have those conversations with the NFL. So it's going to be really interesting with Tetairoa McMillan. And really this wide receiver class in general field, not nearly as highly regarded as what we've seen of late. I mean, we had, 7 in the first round last year, 20 in the first 4 rounds, 35 drafted. You got to go back to 2018 and really 2019, 2018, when we had 2 in the first. And we had, 16 in the first 4 rounds in 2019 and 15 in the first 4 rounds in 2018. This wide receiver class kind of resembles those. It doesn't resemble, even 2 years ago, remember we had the 4 receivers. People say, oh, maybe it should be only 1. Baloney. It should have been 4. Right now, Quentin Johnston's still trying to find his way from a consistency standpoint, but Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith, and Jigba have been fantastic. So again, this wide receiver core, kind of like, not recent, but going back to 2019, 2018.
All right, so Mel, because I've heard some of the same feedback that you have gotten, it sounds like, in terms of the range for Tetairoa McMillan. But I've also talked to people, and this is how I feel personally, like this guy is very much worthy of a top 10 pick. I don't know whether Tetairoa McMillan is going to run the 40 this week in Indianapolis. If he does, and the time is 4.4 something, I think he has a chance to go higher than 12th overall. 6'5", 209 pounds. Again, that's a hard body type to find at the wide receiver position. You mentioned the contested catch radius that you're seeing right now on the screen, by the way. This guy's got a volleyball background. He was an elite volleyball player growing up, was T-Mac. It's no surprise that he can jump over wide receivers. If he goes and runs in Indianapolis, Mel, and he's 4'5", then yeah, he might drop closer to pick number 20. This is the question that I have. And again, sometimes we're doing our mocks to make them more representative of how we think the league will draft them as opposed to how we would draft them ourselves. If he runs a 4.51, Mel, should Tetairoa McMillan really drop outside the first 15 or so picks, in your opinion?
I think there's a chance. I think we also have to factor in field 2 interviews. We talk about medicals is important, but interviews are really important for these players too. Okay. And I think when you look at going from one level to the next, what it's going to take from talk about physicality standpoint, when that's what you're really hanging your hat on. That's what's going to determine your fate in the NFL. Will what you saw in college translate to the NFL? Will he be as effective in those types of situations as he was in college at Arizona when he was making all those catches? So I think for McMillan, the process has to play out. The range is definitely there, 12 to 22. It's fluid, and that can change. And obviously, only one team has to be high on a player, and it doesn't even matter what everybody else is saying. Right. You got 32 teams, a lot of different opinions. Yep. But I think right now, Travis Hunter, whether you want him as a wide receiver or corner, is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Yeah. Tetairoa McMillan, T-Mac, is right now battling, and I'll say this now. There is a fast-charging receiver named Emeka Egbuka. Yeah. Emeka Egbuka runs in that 4.4 range He's going to soar up there. So it's no lock right now that T-Mac is the second. If you want to say Travis is the number one receiver, there's no guarantee T-Mac is next. Emeka Egbuka is fast rising, and there's another kid we'll get to in a minute that's fast rising as well that has a ton of talent. So it's going to be really interesting between now and late April who becomes wide receiver 2, or if you want to say Travis is a corner, wide receiver 1.
Yeah, there's a lot of teasing right there by Mel Kiper Jr. More to come in just a few moments. But we also have a third wide receiver that you did not mention in either of your two fast-rising wideouts, who many believe is a clear-cut top 3 wide receiver. All right, these rankings, of course, subject to change. And in some cases, we might go multiple weeks before updating our rankings. Check back again on Tuesday or Wednesday, and you'll see Mel's updated positional ranks, plus his new mock draft. Right now, you're seeing Luther Burden III on that top 3 wide receiver list. Will he actually be Mel's wide receiver 3? More to come on all of the top wide receivers in the 2025 draft class in just a minute as First Draft rolls along. All right, welcome back into First Draft. He's Mel Field. We are discussing the top wide receivers in the 2025 draft class. And Mel, we talked at the end of the last block about how for a long time it was Luther Burden as maybe not just wide receiver 3, but even wide receiver 2. Matt Miller, our guy, had him at wide receiver 1 for a good chunk of this season. But is Luther Burden still a lock to not just be wide receiver 3, Mel? Is he a lock to go in the first round anymore?
No, he is not. Luther Burden III is a wide receiver who, going into this year, based on what he had done the previous season with 86 catches, 14-yard average, and 9 touchdowns, he was the guy. He was the guy that people couldn't handle. So you expected this year for an improvement to basically happen, and all of a sudden Luther Burden III is a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Didn't happen. He was quiet in some of those games. Theo Weiss Jr. was the guy they went to. Now, to Luther Burden III's credit, in a lot of those games late, when they had to come back, they were the comeback kids. They were the cardiac kids in college football. I mean, they came back in games, storming back in the second half, made those halftime adjustments, got the ball to him late, and he made some key catches in those games where they had to make those dramatic comebacks. So for Luther Burden III, to answer the question, if he goes in the first, is Pittsburgh a possibility? Washington Commanders would be a possibility late first. If not, he drops into the second round. And that's one of those guys right now you say, okay, with Emeka Egbuka soaring and another receiver jumping up there as well, which we'll get to in a second, Luther Burden III has dropped back a bit. Does that mean it's going to remain that way to late April? Who knows? Yeah. And let's face it, there's a lot to like about Luther Burden III. From what happened in 2023 to glimpses this year of what we saw 2 years ago.
Yeah, Mel,
one team loves him, Field. Yep. He still goes in the first. But right now, the consensus of the calls I made is early to mid-second round.
Mel, I'm getting the same vibe right now. Maybe late first for Luther Burden III. I had him at 25th in the most recent mock that I did about a month ago. So let me just break this down, because there are a lot of people that are still big fans of Luther Burden that are saying you guys are crazy for thinking this guy won't go in the first round. Heck, Mel, I remember a couple months ago, we answered a question from Twitter when someone called us bleeping crazy for thinking that Luther Burden could fall into even the 20s. Here is where I think the NFL is at right now with Luther Burden, at least based off talking to people that have scouted him closely. What changed for Luther Burden that led to a dramatic downshift in production from 2023 to 2024? We see this happen with guys when they lose their quarterback. Wasn't the case? Brady Cook was the quarterback in 2023. Brady Cook was the quarterback in 2024. By the way, Brady Cook, pretty darn good quarterback. He's going to be at the Combine this week. This is not some total black hole at quarterback that led to Luther Burden falling off. The explosion was not nearly as impressive this year as it was the year prior. The run after catch stuff was not even close to the same area in 2024 as it was in 2023. Scouts have been trying to figure out why. What happened? It's why, and we talked about this weeks ago, Mel, these next 2 months are more important for Luther Burden III than maybe any other wide receiver in this class. It starts with running the 40 in Indianapolis this week. If you can check off that box, we may start to talk about him back in round 1. But based off what he put on tape this year and based off some of the questions that scouts have right now, he's not a lock to go in the first round. Let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum, though, Mel. Some hard-charging wide receivers, including one from Ohio State that you teased in the last block. I would say, Mel, that Ohio State has one of the better histories in terms of wide receivers getting to the NFL. How about this? None of them in the history of the college football program at The Ohio State University have more career catches than Emeka Egbuka, who had 202 during his time in Columbus. What's the skinny on him?
Versatility, professionalism, route running, consistency, blocking, doing the dirty work, doing all the things a lot of guys don't want to do and frankly don't do. He does. The production, remember in 2023 he had that ankle injury. That's why his numbers went down from 74 catches to 41. Average per catch down from around 15.6 down to 12.6. Bottom line is this year he bounced out 81 catches. Okay, he was the key guy, 10 touchdown receptions. He had a concentration drop here and there. That was it. Yep. He was money. And there's word that he could run in the 4.4 range, or he has and he will and he can. Yep. If he runs in that 4.45 range, Emeka Egbuka is going in the first round and maybe in the middle of the first round. I'll tell you, the great fit for him, if you say great fit, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Ooh, I like that
They have had diva receivers, right?
Yes, they have.
They've always had that.
Yep.
This guy is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
He is the ultimate professional, all business, experience. You can count on him. We talk about quarterbacks. First one in, last one out. Who's the great leader? Who sets the tone? Who does everybody go to for knowledge and information and everything you need to be a great football player? Emeka Egbuka is that guy. So for me, when you're Pittsburgh and that's what you need, regardless of who the quarterback is, you better get some weapons for that quarterback. I'm hoping it's Justin Fields. We'll see how that goes. Bottom line is Emeka Egbuka right now, the 40-time critical, but he played like a first rounder.
Yeah, Mel, I'm with you there. And by the way, the character comparison that I've gotten on Emeka Egbuka is Terry McLaurin, former Ohio State wide receiver as well. Now, that's saying something because Terry McLaurin had some of the best football character that some scouts have ever covered in their time in the NFL. And perhaps it's just because they both played wide receiver at Ohio State. All I'm saying is, to Mel's point, this is the kid that you can count on 8 days a week. There is zero concerns that Emeka Egbuka is not going to put in the work. This guy is going to bring it every time he is on the field and everything he has to do off the field to ensure that he is a very good player at the NFL level. Last thing that I will say about Emeka is this guy's clutch, Mel. This guy is clutch. I remember 2 years ago against Notre Dame, very contested game. It just felt like every time I turned, Emeka's making these huge catches. This past season as well, huge catches. And you mentioned the selflessness. One of the realities for Ohio State this year is that Emeka Egbuka became the number 2 wide receiver, right? They have this freshman phenom and Jeremiah Smith, who might go down as the greatest Ohio State wide receiver ever. I know that sounds like hyperbole, but that's how special of a talent he is. Emeka said, I'm good with that. I'll do everything else I need to do to help us win games, whether it's blocking, like you mentioned, whether it's just making short yardage catches to move the chains. You name it, he did it. This guy who was 29th in my most recent mock draft and 25th in my overall top 25 rankings has a real shot to be a first-round pick. All right, take one more look at Mel's top 10 wide receivers because we are not done, nowhere close to it because there are plenty of more wideouts that we are going to discuss. You see the first 7 right there, the 3 others on the bottom. A reminder, these are going to be updated. So what you see right now, it's like a Snapchat. It's going to go away soon enough. Find a way to store it in your memory for just a little bit and then check back Monday or Tuesday to see the updated top 10 rankings. But we have more on the wide receivers coming up in just a bit, so do not go anywhere. First Draft, rolling along. He's Mel on field. Here on First Draft, Mel Kiper Jr. and Field Yates talking about wide receivers that you need to know for the 2025 draft class. Mel, we have covered 4 in depth already, and it sounds like maybe we reverse the order on wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4. Let's get to number 5, and a guy who I thought this year, Mel, made a big leap in his first year at Texas. He came from the University of Houston. He transfers to Texas, where they had some big vacancies after losing both Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell to the draft this past year. Matthew Golden brought a lot to the table. What's the scouting report on how he wins?
Well, he won at Houston. He did a good job there with the Houston Cougars, so he wasn't a one-year wonder. You remember Adonai Mitchell came there from Georgia and put up big numbers, became a second-round pick. Matthew Golden's numbers surpassed Adonai Mitchell. He had 3 more catches than Mitchell, averaged 17 yards a catch as opposed to Mitchell at 15-4. Didn't have quite as many touchdowns, 9 as opposed to 11. But 1 year with yours at Texas, Matthew Golden became the guy. It was Isaiah Bond. Remember, he was the hype transfer. Matthew Golden was not the hype transfer, Field, but yet this guy became the guy that Quinn Ewers went to early and often in those games. Now, he had a drop every now and then, but overall, he was the man. And to put together the kind of year he had solidifies him, in my opinion, as a borderline first-round pick. I thought about him, and the mock's coming out tomorrow. He was heavily in that discussion to be one of those receivers who could get into that late 1, early 2 range. We talk about a guy who's going to, I think, be a heck of a pick. We've had some great second-round receivers. Don't think that second-round receivers haven't been better in a lot of cases than the first. Go back and do the research on that and check the history of wide receivers in round 2. I'm not going to waste time giving those laundry lists of names, but they're there. He could be that second-round pick that turns out to be a heck of a player. He did it at Houston. He was productive for a couple years there with the Cougars, and he goes to Texas, and he becomes the guy. Well, Isaiah Bond not playing up to the potential we thought. He had some minor injury, but bottom line is Matthew Golden, I think, stepped his game up and is now, like I say, in the discussion as a borderline first-round draft choice.
Mel, he's got juice. He's got some serious juice. You saw he averaged major yards per catch, 58 catches for nearly 1,000 yards this past season for Matthew Golden, who stepped up as that number 1 pass catcher in the Texas offense. Extremely reliable. This is something that I try not to do that often, Mel, because it's something that I think anybody could say about players. But I think in the case of both Emeka Egbuka and Matthew Golden, good football players, right? Like, we can start there when describing what they bring to the table. Good, reliable football players who do what you need them to do and then some on a play-in, play-out basis. Let's stay in the state of Texas, Mel. And I don't even know I think they're in the Big 12. I've lost track of who's in what conference. They're no longer in the same conference, but they were for a while. And we finally got the unlocking of TCU wide receiver Savion Williams. We've been waiting for years to see this guy realize his potential, and Mel, this was the year.
I'll tell you what, Field, he is an interesting prospect because you think about, great athlete in high school, track, basketball, everything, right? Quarterback. For the football, quarterback. Now he's the Wildcat quarterback this year in those games. He's running. There's coach saying, hey, he's a beast. We can't tackle him. He runs with power. He runs with speed. He's got change of direction. He's intense when he's got that ball in his hands. And he became more consistent. There were times I thought he fought the ball a little bit in previous years. Was it natural? Was it hands? Is it body? It came much more naturally this year. Because sometimes body catching is the right thing. Most time extend those hands. He was natural. Hand-eye was working. Everything was working together. He became, this year, a weapon. And I know the comp's going to be Cordero Patterson. I know all that.
Yep.
Savion Williams, another guy who's big, 6'4" and change, 6'5", 225 pounds. He's got it all going, Field. And if you're looking for a guy, like, say, Wildcat quarterback, he was very effective. They couldn't stop him. They couldn't tackle him, okay? He can throw the football. Okay, he can also throw it. So the gadget plays, those creative gadget plays that you need at critical moments, hey, he can air it out. He can get the ball in his hands and boom, defense sleeps on the job. He's throwing the ball 65, 70 yards down the field. Savion Williams is a weapon. He's going to be a guy that I think people are going to become more and more enamored with as we go through this process. Are we sleeping a little bit on Savion Williams? I would not be surprised at all. And we talked about Matthew Golden. He's another one of those receivers who's right now on the cusp, I'll say on the cusp, pre-combine, of becoming a guy who goes in that 20 to 32 range, at worst, early second round.
All right, so I really like Savion Williams a lot. He has everything you brought to the table. I mean, this guy was like built in a lab in terms of some of the physical traits, right? Big, fast, powerful, explosive. And it was a wonderful thing to see TCU discover how to best utilize him this past season. I also have to come clean here, Mel. I have a little bit of a fear on prospects kind of like this, right? Because you mentioned the Cordero Patterson comparison, which I think is a great one, by the way. The peak version of Cordero Patterson as an offensive player was at times dangerous, but was it ever the focal point of a passing or a running game? No. You think about a guy like Laviska Shenault, Mel. He was a player who had some of the same traits that we're discussing right now coming out of Colorado a few years ago as a second-round pick. This is all I want for Savion Williams because he doesn't go high. He's too big, too fast, too powerful to not go high. I want him to go somewhere who knows how to utilize him, right? Velus Jones, another guy, third-round pick out of Tennessee a few years ago. I need him to go to an offensive coordinator that is part of the haves and not the have-nots, right? Like Ben Johnson with Savion Williams, sign me up. Todd Monken with Savion Williams, Andy Reid / Matt Nagy, sign me up, right?
How about Sean Payton?
Sean Payton, sign me up. Looking for that joker. But you know what I mean? Like, I just get nervous on this type of player who, as a pure wide receiver, Mel, just couldn't ever really find his way. I don't want a team that we're going to put him on the perimeter and have him run routes and we can be the team that gets him to do that. No, like the secret sauce here is to make him this jack of all trades X factor on offense. That's what I want for Savion Williams. Where he goes is going to really determine about how I feel for his future in the NFL. Do you see where I'm coming from on that part?
100%. That's why for all the physical talent and athletic talent that he possesses, Savion Williams is not a lock first rounder.
Yeah.
So you're 100% right. But when you get a guy like this in a second round, if he goes in the second round and drops down that far, which is debatable, you're getting yourself one whale of a player. Who is another guy, talk about unselfish. He's still developing. The best is yet to come. I said high school quarterback, Wildcat quarterback this year. The inconsistency, catching the ball, and the natural catching it improved dramatically, I thought, this year. So for me, yes, on the rise player, tremendous, gifted talent. I think if you can get him, if he becomes a mid-second round pick, I think you can be excited about that choice.
All right, Mel, last thing for me before we get into another portion of the show. I want to put this on record before we head to Indianapolis. He might already be there for all I know, but at some point the wide receivers are going to arrive. Savion Williams' teammate, Jack Bech, has one of the most important physical drills of the week ahead. If Jack Bech runs in the 4.4s in the 40, going to go really high, Mel. He's going to go high no matter what, but I think the conversation takes on new life for Jack Bech if he runs a 4.4 something. I went back and watched a lot of Big 12 defensive backs this year. We've got two from UCF. I mean, you just name a Big 12 school, and they probably have a defensive back that is somewhere on the draft radar. The common theme when watching these guys, none of them can cover Jack Bech. They just can't. This guy is constantly open, makes catches, excellent after the catch. If he runs 4.4 something, just put this on the record right now. He's going to go really, really high. Like, I'm talking top 40 type player if he runs 4.4 something. I personally believe is either in the realm of possibilities or deserving of being in the realm of possibilities because no one can cover that guy every single week on tape. All right,
I'm with you, Phil, but hey, keep this in mind.
Okay,
Xavier Worthy ran 4.21 and didn't move up even after running 4.21.
Yeah.
He should have, but he didn't. Okay.
Yep, he should have. You're right. There is certainly more than just that running test. But again, the difference between 4.52 and 4.47 in some people's eyes, that's 0.05 seconds over 40 yards can be very, very consequential. All right, we are not done. It's coming up on First Draft. The Titans have a pretty complicated decision to make at number 1. Is it even more complicated than we thought? Stick around to find out. All right, we are back. He's Mel, I am Field, and scrap the Titans conversation. Mel, we're diving into wide receivers more. This social question comes from, I'm going to call it Grecky on Twitter, Grecci, who says, as a Titans fan, I guess this is Titans related, I don't love the idea of Travis Hunter at 1 as a receiver. Is he anything like anyone from last year's draft? How does the 2024 draft class stack up to 2025? So we're going to focus more on that 2024 versus 2025 part of the question here, Mel, but how does he stack up to that top 3? If you were, and I know this is hard to do once the guys have actually played a season in the NFL, but do you think your grade for Marvin Harrison Jr., Travis Hunter, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze is fairly close, or is there a big gap between those 3 and Hunter this year?
It's a very difficult question to answer, right? Because he's such a great football player, and you can't forget about the cornerback spot. You just can't.
Of course, yeah.
You got to factor. He's a cornerback. He's a potential lockdown corner, in addition to being a great wide receiver. Where, if you say, forget corner, well, guess what? What would he have been if he wasn't a corner? If he wasn't playing cornerback, where would he be at wide receiver then, Field? What if he wasn't a wide receiver? He was just a corner.
Yeah.
Well, would he have been a corner? He would have been a hell of a lot better.
Yeah.
Just on the fact he wouldn't have been a little gassed because he's playing both sides of the ball and he's out there every snap and he's doing all these things from a physicality standpoint on the football field. So that's a question you really can't answer. Yeah. I will say this. I'll answer it this way. He would have a higher grade than any of those guys. Okay? Any of them.
There you go.
His grade as a football player would be higher than any of those receivers last year. Any of them. Because he's a guy who can play corner at a high level and play wide receiver at a high level. And once he figures it out and he determines what that spot is, he's not going to play both ways in the NFL for long, right? You got to pick your spots. Once he is playing one spot the entire way and focuses on that, he's going to get better at that spot. So whatever he is at wide receiver now, whatever he is at cornerback now, whatever spot he determines as his spot, he's going to be better. Yeah. So, hey, he's hot. His rating for me would be better than any of those receivers last year.
I used this comparison previously, and I know that we like comps with nuance. But there is some Justin Jefferson to his wide receiver tape. There's some Justin Jefferson traits within the Travis Hunter receiving portfolio, from the natural playmaking to the vision with the football to the combination of change of direction and kind of this. He's sort of like Gumby. He can take these hits, bounce off defenders. He's not the biggest guy, but he bounces off these guys and keeps his balance somehow, some way, and just keeps on going. I am a very big fan of Travis Hunter. But let's talk about this class, though, just in general, Mel, because, again, it was a remarkable class last year. I mean, Ladd McConkey has over 1,000 yards and goes in the second round, 34th overall. Like, if Ladd's in this class this year, Mel, he's clear. I mean, he might be a clear-cut wide receiver, too. At worst, wide receiver 3 for me on this year's big board. So how do we stack up the 2024 class to the 2025 class? I think we feel pretty confident the top end, way better last year. How about, like, the bulk of the class? Is this just overall a lot less deep than where we were last year, too?
I think it's got some depth to it, Field, if you pick the right guy. I mean, we have to talk about Tez Johnson, who can fly, right? But he's 155, 160 pounds, okay? Everybody's talking about Tank Dell. Tank Dell was a third-round pick. Tez Johnson, what you could create now and get them where they're not even being touched. Everybody said, I remember all the former players that are now analysts saying, Worthy can't play. Worthy's not going to be great. They're going to beat him up. They're going to rough him up. You can't touch him. Okay, you create ways where you just can't touch them. So to me, that's Tez Johnson from Oregon, who did it at Troy and he did it at Oregon. So overall, there's going to be some guys that end up being third-round picks to be really good. But are they going to be 20 in the first 4 rounds? Are they going to be 35 drafted? We'll see. That last year's draft had 7 first-round picks. I think there's right now you're talking about 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's how you look at Travis Hunter. But to me, no. This wide receiver core, when you talk to people in the league, it's in a down year. It's in a down year for wide receivers. There's no question about that. It doesn't compare. Like I said, you have to go back to 2018, 2019, when we had 2 wide receivers in the first round and only, 15 in the first 4 rounds and then 16 in the first 4 rounds. Those 2 years, that was it. So I think it's going to be similar to that field. But if you can pick the right guy, there's going to be busts in this draft in the 2nd to 4th round. Guys just don't do it to the extent we thought they could. But there's also going to be some gems that you get in those rounds. You just got to pick the right one. There's going to be a very little margin for error there. You just got to get lucky and fortunate to get the right guy. Yeah, Mel, we keep talking about the running backs. Now, there's going to be an Aaron Jones in round 5 or an Isaiah Pacheco in round 7. I think this is the year where I do think we'll have a couple of those later round wide receivers who drop for whatever reason. We've talked about Xavier Restrepo, one of our favorites from the University of Miami. I still think he's got a chance to be a top 100 player, but he'll have a consequential 40 time this week as well, right? Not going to blow you away probably with his speed, but he just gets open, catches the football, strong, powerful, clutch, all-time leading receiver at Miami. That speaks to me, at least in terms of what kind of player he can be. Field, there was another guy at college. LeJohntay Wester hopped in every game. That's right, sure did, yeah. I mean, that guy, and people overlook him because of the size. Like I said, you can figure out ways. You can get guys to not have to worry about being roughed up. Okay, so for Wester to be able to play the way he did when Travis Hunter was getting all that publicity, and rightfully so, LeJontay Wester is one of those guys like Tez Johnson that are going to play in the NFL. It's a space game now. Yeah, it's a space game, and these guys are lightning fast and lightning quick. Yeah, LeJontay Wester might be, if we were just to grade prospects off their punt return ability, he might be my number 1 prospect amongst punt returners in this class. He was an All-American in that category just a couple of years ago before transferring to Colorado for his final season. They had some guys that could really go at Colorado. All right, coming up next, Mel and I are going to do what we always do or often do to close out shows. We're going to declare we got a guy, and for those of you that love that day 3, we're going to give you a couple of orange crushers who deserve a whole lot more attention. All right, back here on First Draft, Mel and Field to wrap things up by planting some flags. And Mel, we call it We Got a Guy. It's a player that whether they're going 5th overall or in the 5th round, you just love. If you were in a draft room right now, you would take that gavel, bring it out, and bang it. So give me your name. Who is your pre-draft We Got a Guy? We got a guy, and my guy is Charles Grant from William & Mary. Left tackle field. We always want him. We got to find him. He was 245 pounds coming out of high school. He played football 2 years in high school. Didn't play until his junior year at the high school level. Was an outstanding wrestler as well at the high school level. You look at the guy that's tremendous arm length. I love that. Yep. He's added all that weight up to 300 pounds, 41 career starts, only a couple sacks allowed, 2 sacks allowed in 3 years, getting better and better as he learns more about the game where he hadn't played a lot of football. You talk about upside. and what he can be once he gets an offensive line coach in the NFL to work with him on a regular basis. Charles Grant, William and Mary, left tackle, second or third round, very possible. He's a guy I don't think gets the day 3 field. Yep. He's too skilled. He's too talented, and he's going to keep getting better and better with that limited football background, even though he played all those snaps, but he did it at a 1AA program at William & Mary. Charles Grant is going to be a guy you're going to hear, like I say, on Friday night, day 2 of the draft.
Yep, Mel, I'm with you there. I think he ends up in the top 100 as well. This is going to sound, again, oversimplified, but when you're watching players at smaller schools, we've talked about this with Mike Green from Marshall, you want to feel them every single game, and you want to say, that guy is clearly better than almost any player that he lines up opposite of. That was the case with Charles Grant, even for a guy who was very inexperienced as a college football left tackle. That would also apply to Donovan Jackson. My guy for this week, Mel, is going to go higher than Charles Grant. But Ohio State guard turned left tackle Donovan Jackson was one of the great stories of the second half of the college football season. All right, so Josh Simmons, who we've talked about a bunch, gets hurt in October. Major injury that he's still recovering from. Ohio State says we could bring somebody else off the bench, or we could take this guy who's been entrenched for years as our left guard and say, can you do something you haven't done before at the college level during your final season in college football, where scouts are watching your every single snap? What's it going to look like? Can we try it? Donovan Jackson willingly moves out to left tackle from left guard. He's an All-American guard who says, fine, I'll do it. I'll go play tackle, which you're auditioning for your NFL livelihood every single week. What if it looks terrible? Scouts may say, is this guy even athletic enough to be a guard, much less at left tackle? He decides to do it. And it was not perfect coming out of the gates, Mel. But by the end of this season, he had me convinced he could play left tackle if needed in the NFL. Strong like an ox, fights every single snap, good foot speed, obviously, to play that left tackle spot. Very instinctive. He anticipates what is coming from defensive players. I'm all about Donovan Jackson. I think, Mel, I said this on the show a couple weeks ago, if he found his way into the top 20 picks, that might be, quote-unquote, higher than where consensus views him. I'd say good job by whoever takes him. This guy, to me, feels like a high ceiling and high floor player.
He was the MVP field because guess what? They don't win a national title without Donovan Jackson, in my opinion.
Yep.
You can have all the other talent. All those guys came back, but then Josh Simmons got hurt, right, in that Oregon game. And when he moved to left tackle, he solidified a spot that is critical. And for Will Howard, allowed him to do his thing, Henderson and Judkins to do their thing, Egbuka to catch all those passes, Jeremiah Smith, all those skill guys to go out and perform to the level we expected them to perform at. But without Donovan Jackson, you could make a strong argument that they don't win that gauntlet of games. They went through a ton of tough games late in the year. Forget the loss to Michigan. That's a forgotten memory now, right? How about that gauntlet in the playoffs? And to be able to go through that and win the way they did. And if they had lost to Oregon and Michigan, they couldn't afford another one in there as well. But to be able to play the way he did from that point on, when Josh Simmons got hurt at left tackle, I think he was one of the true MVPs of college football. And I think he's going to be a legend and a hero when he goes back to Columbus the rest of his life.
Yep. And Mel, again, I know that sounds like a spicy take. Top 20 for Donovan Jackson. It may not happen, right? That may be a long shot. But if it does happen, I'm not going to sit there on draft night and say, I could have gotten him at 25 and felt good. I'd say, I don't care. I have conviction on players like Donovan Jackson. If that guy finds his way to Detroit, where they pick in the order 26 or 27, sprint that card in right away for Donovan Jackson. He is tough as it comes. All right, finally, Mel, we're going to end the show with a segment that is really, like most of the things on First Draft, an idea presented by you. It's Orange Crushers. It's players who deserve more national attention, who simply aren't getting enough of them. And a year ago, Mel, this guy may have been further up on the radar, but give us your Orange Crusher for this week.
I don't know why he's not. I went back and looked at him the last couple of weeks. Ashton Gelati was fun to watch play football because of the hustle, the determination, the want to. This guy, talking about 2024, he had 10 tackles, lost 4.5 sacks. But he had 11 sacks the previous year, 3 forced fumbles, was dominant against BC, NC State, Notre Dame, Virginia, Kentucky, had 7 sacks in 2022. He was a state, in the high school. What did they do in track? We talked about William and Mary's Charles Grant, right? Wrestler. Okay. How about shot putter in high school? Ashton Gelati. State champion power lifter as well. He's got bend. He's got the hand usage. To me, he's got the secondary moves, and he's got, like I say, that determination to fight through and just chase, and he can close like a cat as well. I'm really wondering why people aren't more on Ashton Gillotte. Ashton Gillotte, to me, I got to believe the latest he goes is the 3rd round. I'd take him in a second. Pass rusher who plays the way he did on a consistent basis every year at Louisville, all 4 years at Louisville, he was out there setting the tone. He was the tone setter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Ashton Gillotte, you talk about an orange crusher. This guy, from an attitude and a talent standpoint, you put it all together, hey, he is a nightmare trying to block. If the offensive tackle goes up against this guy, better bring it, because he will bring it every snap.
I have a couple thoughts. I like the player a lot, too. I think in part because he had 4.5 sacks this year after 11 the year prior, right? It's just like the natural, hey, it wasn't quite as good during the final season. This kind of dip just tends to lead us to feel a little bit less strongly about a player. My other thought, Mel, would be this, is he doesn't look like a pure edge rusher, right? He also doesn't look like a pure defensive tackle, kind of a hybrid. That might be enough to make people not talk about him as much as maybe his play deserves and merits. But I'm with you, very, very productive player. That edge class, Mel, we haven't talked about as quite as much as the defensive tackle class and the running back class, also very deep. That's going to be one of those where it's just like, what do you value most in that position that is going to influence the order of how guys come off the board? My Orange Crusher of the week, Mel, this is a deep cut now, but he was down there at the Senior Bowl, and he's a hard guy to miss. Keandre Jackson. Such a deep cut. We don't even have a headshot of this guy. Illinois State, defensive back, but that might not necessarily be the perfect way of categorizing him because he is all over the field for this Illinois State defense. He's a safety. He plays on the edge. He literally lines up where you normally see a 275-pound defensive end. He plays linebacker. This guy's mean. I don't know him personally, but I don't know if I want to be friends with him because he's not a very nice guy. He punishes players, Mel. This was one of the most impressive hitters that I've studied at any position in this entire draft class. He reminds me, in terms of his physicality and his willingness, of a 4th-round pick last year from the 49ers in Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest, who made a huge mark his rookie season as well. Keandre Jackson, I do have some questions about whether he can really handle deep field coverage duties. I think he's a better going forward proactive athlete than reactive athlete. This guy is so versatile, though. And he is so physically imposing and so willing to take on contact that at worst, Mel, I feel like this guy is going to be the kind of player that the special teams coach goes, give it to me. All 4 units, give it to me right now, because that guy will help us win the field position game every single Sunday.
Hey, Field, am I wrong? I didn't see him on a combine list.
I don't think he's there, Mel, which I don't understand.
Yeah, there's several of those guys I saw in the safety position that are not going to the combine or weren't invited to the combine. And keep in mind, there's been some stars over the years that haven't been. Guys that are playing at a high level in the NFL. So that's not the end-all, be-all, but they can get overlooked a little bit. But in terms of, you said special teams, I've got an Orange Crusher for next week, Field. I'm not going to tell you who he is, but he plays in the SEC. Okay? And he's going to be a guy who's going to wreak some havoc on the defensive side of the ball. But he's also a heck of a special teams player. And when you have that ability, and you also are doing it at a spot where you can maybe develop into, whether it's a pass rusher, as you said, for Keandre, develop into a guy who can start at that safety spot in the 4th round area. That has value. My guy may go next. I have him as my Orange Crusher next week. May go 3rd, 4th round, no later than the 5th. But I'll tell you what, he can get it done. And I can't wait to bring him to light for everybody next week, because guess what? He plays in a big-time conference. Okay. He plays in a big-time program, and people are majorly sleeping on this young man.
Yeah, SEC, that's a big-time conference, big-time program. You got Texas.
They just mark on special teams.
You got Georgia, special teams. I'm not even going to venture a guess. You know why? Because if I do, I'm going to sound like a moron. Because there are a lot of players, and I could be so far off the scent here. We got a couple minutes, Mel, just to wrap this up, and go anywhere with this that you want. Is there something, someone, some trend, whatever it is, that you're looking forward to this week at the Combine that you're saying to yourself, I know it's become this must-see TV event, but I'm really honing in on this?
Here's what I want to see. Is another Texas player the fastest guy? Is Isaiah Bond going to be as fast as Xavier Worthy? Okay. Yep. So, again, what happens with Emeka Egbuka? But JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. JT Tuimoloau had some games where he was dominant, okay? Had a heck of a career. He showed up big in those gauntlet of games for Ohio State. 40 time for him is going to be very important. There's no question about that. I think there's going to be several players like that. Medical. We talked about Savion Revel Jr. from East Carolina. Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, Ohio State. I think he could go top 10 to 15. Medical's going to be important for him. Benjamin Morrison, cornerback, Notre Dame. Riley Mills, defensive tackle, Notre Dame. A host of others. Interviews are going to be really critical for players that people have a little bit of question about. They want to see, put them on the board. Let's talk a little football. Let's do a little research. We want a guy who's totally dedicated, isn't just playing because he can. A lot of these guys play football because they can. Let's figure out. And when you get to the NFL, it separates those guys, okay? You always say, you got the doers and you got the donors, okay? Donors, they just don't want to get it done. They want to rest on their laurels, rest on what happened in high school and college. The NFL separates everybody, Field, and that's why this combine, the measurables are the measurables. Interviews, medical. Interviews, medical are critical to where these guys end up and ultimately determines a lot about what happens in the NFL once they get there.
Mel, well said as always. No one's better than Mel. We can't wait for the combine, but do not forget there is a new mock draft that drops tomorrow. It's Mel's Mock 2.0. We'll have a full recap of that and so much more on Thursday's show, First Draft. We'll talk to you all soon.